The morning light filtered through cracked shutters of a small wooden house sitting on the outer edge of Dustfield, a one-road town buried in a sea of golden fields and forgotten stories. A rooster crowed lazily outside, its voice scratchy from age. Like everything else in this town. Inside, the smell of weak coffee lingered in the kitchen, though the stove had long gone cold. The sink was filled with old pans, most of them scorched from too many reheated meals. A soft cough echoed from the next room. Clara Mayfield, just 17 but worn beyond her years, stood at the counter slicing stale bread with careful precision. Her long dark braids slipped over one shoulder as she leaned forward, hiding her thin frame beneath an oversized sweater. She looked up toward the bedroom where her mother, Martha Mayfield, had been bedridden for the last 4 days. The coughing had grown worse, harsher, more hollow. "Ma?" Clara called gently, setting down the knife. "You want some toast?" There was no reply, just the quiet hum of stillness. Scene 2. A mother's silence. Clara walked slowly into the bedroom, heart quickening. Her mother lay curled under a threadbare quilt, her cheeks pale, her lips dry, her chest rising with strained breaths. "Mama," Clara whispered, sitting at the edge of the bed. Martha stirred. Her voice cracked like dried wood. "I'm sorry, baby. I can't go. Not today." Her eyes darted to the clock. It was already past 7. The ranch expected breakfast by 8. Martha had been the cook for Stone Hollow Ranch for 7 years. She'd never missed a day, not even when Clara's father died. "I'll call Mr. Cole," Clara said, reaching for the rotary phone on the side table. "Tell him you're sick." Martha reached out and stopped her with a trembling hand. "They won't keep me on if I don't show." "You're not going anywhere like this," Clara said, gently but firmly. "Then you go," Martha croaked. "Go in my place." Clara's eyes widened. "Me?" Scene 3. Doubts and determination. Clara had been cooking since she was 10. Her mother taught her everything: how to make cornbread with no cornmeal, gravy with no meat, and how to stretch a meal for 5 from a pantry meant for 1. But cooking for cowboys on a working ranch? That was different. "I'm not ready," Clara whispered. Martha's eyes softened. "You're ready. You've been ready." "I just didn't want it to come this way. I'm just a kid." "No," Martha said. "You're my daughter, and that makes you capable of more than you know." Clara sat frozen, staring at her mother's frail form. "Please," Martha whispered. "Don't let them fire me. They won't take me back if I lose the job." It wasn't just a job, it was their lifeline. That paycheck kept the roof over their heads, paid for medicine, bought oil to keep the lamps burning through long winters. Clara looked at her mother, then at her hands, calloused, steady. She stood up, spine straightening. "I'll go," she said. Scene 4. Farewell to childhood. The sky was the color of copper when Clara stepped outside. The wind tugged at her braid, and the dust stung her eyes. She wore one of her mother's old blouses tucked into a faded denim skirt, boots a half size too big, and a coat patched at the elbows. In one arm, she clutched a battered leather recipe book, its corners softened with age and grease. In the other, a lunch pail filled with bread, eggs, and a little salted butter. She kissed her mother's forehead. "I'll be back before sundown." Martha gripped her hand. "Clara, I'll make them love the food so much they won't care who made it." Her mother smiled weakly. "That's my girl." Scene 5. The road to Stone Hollow. The walk to Stone Hollow Ranch was 7 miles. Clara didn't own a bicycle, and the town's only bus didn't go that far west. So she walked, each bootstep a promise, past the dying orchards, past the water tower rusted with time, past the place where her father's truck had crashed 5 years ago. The sun crept higher, and sweat gathered at her brow, but Clara didn't slow. She arrived just as the ranch's roosters began to crow again, as if mocking her late arrival. The Ranch looked like something out of a story-wide Fields. A barn with faded red paint and a white farmhouse that stood tall but tired. Horses grazed lazily, and cattle mooed from behind split-rail fences. Clara climbed the steps to the porch and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. The door opened with a slow creak, and Grayson Cole stood there, taller than she expected, broader than she imagined. His eyes were gray like storm clouds, his hair unkempt, and his shirt stained with dirt and sweat. A man who spoke little but saw everything. He stared at her. "I'm Clara Mayfield," she said, voice quivering slightly. "Martha's daughter." He raised a brow. "Where's your mother?" "She's sick, sir. Real bad. She can't get out of bed. But she asked me to come in her place, just for today." Grayson crossed his arms. "You're a kid." "I'm 17. That's still a kid? I can cook." Grayson studied her for a long, thick moment. Then he turned and walked back inside, calling over his shoulder, "You've got 1 week." Scene 6. Entering the fire, Clara stepped into the kitchen and was instantly swallowed by the heat. The smell of smoke and old grease. Pans were piled high, the stove sputtered, and a pan of bacon burned in silence. She set her bag down and tied. On an apron. The ranch hands would be coming in soon. Hungry, tired, expecting. Martha's famous biscuits and gravy. Clara's hand shook as she lit the stove. She reached for the flour tin, then stopped. This was her chance. Her test. She opened her mother's recipe book and turned to the page smudged from years of love and labor. Breakfast biscuits for cowboys who don't talk much. She smiled, just barely. Then she began. Scene 2. The cowboys arrived. The screen door banged open. Boots clomped on wood. Laughter echoed in the hallway. Clara peeked through the kitchen door. A group of ranch hands, 5 men, dusty from dawn work, smelling like leather and sweat piled into the long dining table like crows on a fence. None of them older than 40, none of them smiling when they noticed the absence of the usual cook. "Where's Miss Mayfield?" One of them barked. Another, chewing a toothpick, glanced toward the kitchen. "That her kid?" Clara stepped out. Cheeks burning. "My mother's sick. I'll be cooking for the week." There was silence. Then low murmurs, disbelief, a smirk or two. Grayson Cole entered behind them, boots echoing on the wood floor. He didn't say a word, just crossed the room and leaned against the back wall with arms folded, watching. Clara returned to the kitchen and set a pot of coffee on the table, keeping her back straight and her hands steady. The men waited. This was her moment to fail or to prove something. Scene 3. Broken biscuits and shaky hands. Clara poured batter into a skillet, already aware it wasn't right. Too thick, not enough milk. But there was no time to fix it. She shoved it into the oven, then scrambled to whip eggs and slap together gravy with whatever meat bits she could find. When she finally brought out plates, her palms were slick with nervous sweat. Silence fell as the ranch hands stared at the food. Fork scraped. Chewing followed. Then disappointment. "Biscuits are like bricks," one muttered. "Gravy's thin," another added. "No salt in these eggs." Grayson didn't say a word. He stood, picked up his plate, and dumped the contents in the trash. Clara's heart stopped. "You've got 6 days left," he said. Then he left the room. Scene 4. Clara's inner storm. She sat at the counter after breakfast, head buried in her hands. Her first real day, and she'd already failed. Maybe it was too much. Maybe May had been wrong. Maybe Grayson Cole was right. She was just a kid. But as the tears gathered, her eyes caught a folded scrap of paper wedged between 2 cookbooks. She pulled it out. It was old, yellowed. The handwriting was careful, slanted slightly. It read, "Cinnamon. Coffee biscuits, E. H. Cole." Clara blinked. E? That had to be His wife. Her hand hovered over the paper. A new kind of determination stirred in her chest. Scene 5. The quiet rancher outside. Grayson was inspecting fence posts along the ridge. He worked with quiet intensity, each movement purposeful. The others said little to him. They respected him, feared him, but no one claimed to know him. He'd been alone ever since Eleanor, his wife, passed 3 years ago. Since then, the ranch ran with precision, but no warmth. Just routine. And silence. He hadn't expected Clara, certainly not someone so young, so fragile-looking. But when she'd looked him in the eye and asked for the job, he saw something that didn't sit right with pity. It was grit. The same kind he had once known in Eleanor. Still, biscuits that could break a tooth weren't going to cut it. Scene 6. The second morning Clara rose earlier the next day. Hours before dawn, she brought Eleanor's recipe to life, mixing cinnamon and sugar with steady hands, folding dough with care. She cooked in silence, the rhythm familiar. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Let the food tell your story, not your mouth. When the ranch hands arrived, the scent of warm cinnamon hung in the air. Plates were filled. Coffee was poured. Eyes were skeptical. They took cautious bites, then a pause. Damn, one whispered. Another grinned. These taste like Miss Eleanor's. Grayson, sitting at the head, raised an eyebrow but ate every bite. He didn't say a word. But he didn't throw his plate away either. Scene 7. Cowboys and quiet praise. Later that day, Clara found herself alone in the barn, trying to lift a heavy bucket of oats for the horses. It wobbled, nearly toppling. Strong hands caught it just in time. Grayson stood beside her, silent. You need help, you ask, he said. I'm not trying to be a burden. Clara replied, flustered. You're not, he said. Then walked away. It was the first kind thing he'd said to her. It stayed with her all day. Scene 8. Of a new routine. Over the next few days, the ranch kitchen changed. Clara began labeling jars, tossing out old spices, organizing pans. The stove was cleaned. New recipes, some her own, some borrowed from Eleanor's notes, appeared at mealtime. The men stopped complaining. They started offering small words. Nice job. Or, that pie was real good. Even Levi, the roughest of them all, gave her a nod one evening. Grayson remained quiet, but he always cleaned his plate now. Scene 9. Clara's first smile on the 4th night. Clara stayed late to clean the kitchen. Grayson walked in, a notebook in his hand. He said nothing, just placed it on the counter. It was Eleanor's recipe journal. You've earned it, he said, and turned to leave. Clara stared down at the journal, leather-bound, filled with memories of a woman she never knew. Trusted now with it by a man who rarely trusted anyone. She opened it to the first page. Inside was a note written in elegant script. Cooking is just love made edible. Clara smiled. She would stay. Scene 1. A morning like a test. The 5th day began before the stars had fully faded. The moon still hung in the sky, a pale ghost above the hills, as Clara crept into the stone hollow ranch kitchen. The wind howled through the eaves like an omen. Her boots scuffed the floor softly as she moved, quiet, deliberate, nervous. Today wasn't like the others. Today. Grayson had told her he'd be riding into town after breakfast with a buyer, a cattle buyer, a man who would be joining them for the morning meal, a man who could influence the ranch's future. It wasn't just about food anymore. This was pressure. This was reputation. This was a chance to prove herself for real. And Clara Mayfield, 17 years old, stood in the center of it all, holding a basket of eggs and a wooden spoon like they were weapons of war. Scene 2. The quiet. Panic. She cracked the first egg into a bowl. It split badly. Shells floated like wreckage in the whites. She fished them out with trembling fingers. Crack. Another. This time, the yolk burst. Yellow oozed across the counter. She winced. She'd cooked eggs 1,000 times at home, over the wood stove, for her mama. Even for the neighbor once when their own gas had run out. But this kitchen, this cavernous, cast-iron battlefield felt different, bigger, louder. Loneleier. The stove hissed as she turned up the flame. She reached for the butter only to find the tub empty. Panic bloomed in her throat. No butter. For scrambled eggs? She darted to the pantry. Her fingers brushed oil, lard. She settled on bacon grease, her mother's emergency substitute. It would have to do. Scene 3. Smoke and mistake the skillet heated too. Fast. Clara poured in the grease. It hissed violently. She dropped in the eggs. Suddenly flames leapt up with a pop. Ah! She yelped, stumbling backward as the pan sparked. The edges of the egg began to char before the center even settled. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. She grabbed the pan's handle, trying to move it from the heat, but it slipped from her grasp. Clang. The pan clattered to the floor. Eggs splattered like paint across the floorboards. She froze. The smoke detector in the hallway gave one shrill beep, then another. Then the door opened. Scene 4. The man. In the doorway, Grayson Cole stood in the doorway, still as stone. His gray eyes scanned the smoke, the scorched eggs, the greasy pan on the floor. His jaw clenched. Clara stood frozen, the spatula hanging limp in her hand. She opened her mouth. I tried. Out? He said quietly. She blinked. What? Out of the kitchen. Now. Her legs moved before her brain could argue. She stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. Inside, she could hear him moving, the soft clatter of pans being set aside, the creak of the window opening, the silence of disappointment. Scene 5. Levi's laughed 10 minutes later. Clara was sitting on the back steps, her apron balled in her lap, the morning wind slicing against her face. The door swung open again. It wasn't Grayson. It was Levi, one of the older ranch hands, tall, blond, with a smile that never quite reached. His eyes. He leaned against the railing and whistled low. Heard you almost burned the place down, he said. Clara said nothing. He chuckled. Don't worry. Happened to my cousin once. Of course, she was 10. She flinched. He added, You'll get it right eventually, or not. Maybe Mr. Cole'll call in someone else. He walked off whistling, leaving Clara biting the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. Scene 6. Cleaning up the mess by mid-morning. Clara had returned to the kitchen. The smell of smoke had faded, replaced by the scent of coffee and the faint trace of cinnamon. Grayson had done most of the cleanup, but the scorched pan remained in the sink, blackened and sticky like shame. Clara washed it slowly, silently. Grayson entered again, not saying a word at first. Then, finally, you forgot to lower the flame. No, she whispered. He nodded. You panicked. I did. A pause. You gonna do that every time something goes wrong? Clara looked at him. I hope not. Grayson walked to the counter, poured himself a cup of coffee, and stared out the window. The eggs don't matter. It's how you fix things after they break. Then he walked out again. Scene 7. Fixing what's broken. Clara didn't try to cook lunch that day. Instead, she cleaned every surface of the kitchen. She rewrote her mother's biscuit recipe, this time calculating exact ratios for the old oven. She tested the burner flames. Watched how quickly they rose. She flipped through Eleanor Cole's recipe book, searching for tips on heat control, egg fluff, seasoning proportions. Each page felt like a whisper from a ghost. A mentor she never met. By sundown, she had a new plan and a new resolve. Tomorrow she would try again. Not to impress, but to earn her place. Scene 8. The egg redemption. The next morning, Clara rose before even the roosters. She lit the stove carefully, slowly heated the skillet, Added butter she had churned the night before using leftover cream. When she cracked the eggs this time, she did it one at a time into a small bowl, checking for shells before pouring them into the pan. She stirred slowly. Gentle folds, sprinkled salt, a dash of pepper, a pinch of dried chives. The result? Soft, creamy scrambled eggs with golden edges and no smoke. She plated them beside thick slices of skillet cornbread and black coffee. When the ranch hands arrived, they were quiet, but Levi looked at the food, blinked once, then dug in. No smirks. No laughter. Just eating. Clara exhaled. Then she turned and saw Grayson at the door. He didn't speak. Just picked up a plate. Ate. And left his plate clean. Scene 9. Fires make steel. That night, Clara wrote in the margins of her mother's recipe book, Day 5, eggs caught fire. Nearly gave up. But I didn't. See, she closed the book, hands still smelling like smoke and flour. In her bed in the ranch's side quarters, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. She had failed. Badly. Embarrassingly. But she had come back. And that maybe was enough for today. Scene 1. Stillness before sunrise. Sky was still bruised with stars when Clara woke. Cold air whispered through the cracks in the bunkhouse window. She sat up, blankets clinging to her knees, her breath visible in the early morning chill. It had been a week since she arrived. 1 week of early mornings, burnt meals, broken yolks, and barely spoken words. 1 week of tiptoeing around Grayson Cole's sharp silences. 1 week of struggling to be more than a ghost in her mother's place. But today, something in the silence felt different. Softer. She lit the small lantern near her bed, grabbed her worn sweater, and stepped outside. The ranch was still asleep. The hills wrapped themselves in gray fog like tired shoulders. Horses shifted in their stalls. An owl gave its final call. Clara walked toward the kitchen slowly. The fire had already been lit. Scene 2. The man who didn't sleep. Grayson stood at the stove. Coffee bubbled in a dented pot, steam rising around his stubbled jaw. He didn't turn. When Clara entered, just reached for a tin cup and poured 2 helpings. He slid one across the counter toward her. Clara blinked. "Morning," he said simply. She hesitated, then picked up the cup. "Morning." They drank in silence, the only sound the slow gurgle of the percolator. Clara finally whispered, "Couldn't sleep." Grayson shook his head. "Never do." She stared into her coffee. "Me neither." He finally looked at her then. Not just a glance, but a long, curious, measuring look. She didn't shrink under it. He nodded once. Not approval. Not affection. But understanding. Scene 3. The recipe that sparked it. Later that day, Clara was sorting through Eleanor Cole's old recipe book. Its pages were soft with use, the corners curled like dried petals. One note caught her eye, scribbled in the margin. Of a peach cobbler recipe. Grayson liked this on cold days. Always asked for seconds. Clara traced the handwriting with her fingertip. Peach cobbler. She'd never made one before. Not with fresh peaches, and certainly not from this kind of script. But something in her leaned into the challenge. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Scene 4. The scent of memory. The aroma filled the kitchen by late afternoon, sweet, warm, spiced with cinnamon and brown sugar. The ranch hands trickled in for supper. Even Levi, forever grumbling, paused at the doorway, sniffing the air with suspicion. Clara served the cobbler last. Still warm. Grayson entered the room just as the first spoon clinked on china. He stopped. His eyes fell on the dessert. Something flickered across his face, then disappeared. He sat down slowly, said nothing, but he ate it. All of it. Then he stood, quietly walked to the stove, and ladled himself a second helping. No one said a word, but Clara smiled to herself. Scene 5. A walk through stillness. That evening, Clara went out to the paddock to check the troughs. she found Grayson there, fixing a fence post alone, the sky painted orange and violet behind him. She hesitated at the gate. He looked up. "You ever use a hammer?" he asked. She blinked. "Not really." "Then now's a good time." He tossed her one. For the next hour, they worked in quiet tandem. He drove in the nails, she held the planks. Occasionally, he corrected her grip, nothing more than a nudge, a gesture. They didn't talk about the past, they didn't talk about the future, they just worked. But it was enough. Scene 6. Ghosts of the house after dark. Clara returned to the kitchen. She found an old drawer stuck shut, and after some struggle, it popped open. Inside, yellowing photographs. One caught her eye, a young Grayson with Eleanor, standing by the same stove Clara used each morning. Eleanor's smile was wide. Grayson's wasn't, but his eyes were soft, boyish. She stared at it for a long time, then gently closed the drawer. Scene 7. A story in a letter. The next morning, a letter arrived for Clara. It was from her mother. She stepped away from the others and opened it near the barn. Martha's handwriting was shaky. "I'm getting better. The fever broke. I'm resting more now. Clara, I'm so proud of you. Mr. Cole wrote me yesterday. Said you were still there, that you stayed, that you're learning, that you remind him of someone. I think he meant Eleanor. I think you're doing more than cooking there. I think you're healing something in that house. I love you, Mama." Clara folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. Her chest ached, but not with fear. This time, it was something closer to hope. Scene 8. The quiet bond at supper. Grayson stayed after the others had gone. He lingered by the stove while Clara wiped down the counters. "Your mother's doing better?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, she'll be back on her feet soon." A pause. "You plan on going back?" She looked up. "I should," she said, "but I'd like to stay a little longer, if that's all right." Grayson gave her one slow nod. "It's all right." She smiled. For the first time, he smiled too. It was small, quick, but real. A quiet bond had begun, not out of words, but out of trust, out of fire, eggs, and shared silence. By now, Clara Mayfield had been cooking at Stone Hollow Ranch for nearly 2 weeks. The food had improved. The men had stopped whispering. Grayson had stopped scowling, well, mostly. But outside the ranch, in the town of Dustfield, whispers bloomed. Like weeds. At Millie's Mercantile, 2 women exchanged gossip over a barrel of beans. "You hear about Grayson Cole? The widower?" Hired a girl to cook for him. Not a woman, a girl? That's what I said. Over at Sutter's Feed and Grain, a rancher with thick boots and a thicker opinion chimed in. "Word is he's got her living up there." "In the bunkhouse? Alone?" "Yep. No chaperone?" "None." By sunset, the town had spun its own version of Clara's story, one with raised eyebrows, pursed lips, and sideways glances, and not a shred of truth. Scene 2. Levi listens back. At the ranch, Levi Barnes, a lean, sharp-jawed cowboy with a permanent sneer, sat in the mess hall polishing his boots. He overheard a ranch hand chuckle. "Clara made peach cobbler again today. Better than Eleanor's, I reckon." Levi didn't smile, didn't join in. He just watched. Listened. And slowly, the bitterness in his chest twisted tighter. Scene 3. Grudges unspoken. Levi had been at Stone Hollow for almost 4 years. 4 years of breaking his back. 4 years of bringing in horses, fixing fences, riding herd. And 4 years of waiting for something more, a raise, a promotion, respect. Now some girl barely old enough to vote had waltzed in and turned the ranch inside out. She cooked, cleaned, organized. The boss smiled at her now. The hands respected her. Grayson even gave her Eleanor's recipe book. A gesture. Levi had once begged for and been denied. He'd asked Grayson to let him take over the bunkhouse management. Grayson said, "You're not what this place needs right now." But Clara was? Scene 4. Seeds of Sabotage. The next morning, Clara was baking cornbread for lunch. She stepped outside to collect wood for the stove, apron fluttering in the breeze. Levi slipped inside. Quick, quiet. He walked to the spice rack. His fingers danced across labels: salt, sugar, baking soda, until he found what he was looking for. Epsom salts, not deadly, but enough to ruin a dish. Enough to turn sweet cornbread into something bitter and strange. He poured a few tablespoons into the sugar jar, then left. Whistling. Scene 5. The meal goes wrong. Lunch was quiet at first. Too quiet. Clara served generous squares of cornbread alongside chili and sweet tea. Forks lifted. Mouths chewed. Chewing slowed. Then grimaces. What in? One of the ranch hands spat into a napkin. Tastes like soap. Another gagged. What did you put in this? Clara's heart dropped. I followed the same recipe, she stammered. I swear. Levi leaned back, shaking his head in mock sympathy. Maybe the kitchen's too much for you. The other ranch hands pushed plates away. Grayson didn't touch his. Clara's hand shook. Her throat closed. I don't understand, she whispered. I made it the same way as always. Check your sugar tin, Grayson said quietly. She did, then froze. The smell was off, sharp, bitter. She dipped in a finger. Tasted. Not sugar. Salted magnesium. Her eyes lifted in horror. Someone switched it. Scene 6. Silence and shame. Grayson stood. The room went still. I want this kitchen spotless by sundown, he said, and no dinner tonight. Then he walked out. No anger. No yelling. Just disappointment. And that was somehow worse. Clara felt her throat tighten. The corners of her eyes burned. Levi walked past her as he left, offering a shrug. Tough luck, kid. Scene 7. A storm in the barn. That evening, Clara found herself in the barn. She didn't remember walking there. Didn't remember sitting on the hay bale. But there she was. Knees pulled to her chest, apron dirty, face flushed. Why did I think I could do this? A soft shuffle of boots. Grayson. He didn't speak at first. Just leaned against the opposite stall, arms folded, gaze distant. It wasn't your fault, he said finally. Clara looked up. You believe me? He nodded. I checked the supply shelves. Epsom salts half empty. A pause. She whispered, Why would someone do that? Grayson didn't answer. But his jaw tensed. Then. Sometimes folks don't like change, especially when it doesn't include them. She exhaled. Should I go home? Grayson looked at her. His voice was low, firm. Not unless you want to. Silence stretched between them. Then he said, I'll be having breakfast here tomorrow. I hope there's biscuits. Clara's chest squeezed. She wiped her eyes and nodded. Biscuits it is. Scene 8. Truth in the shadows. That night, Levi walked out to the paddock, his boots crunching frost-tipped grass. He lit a cigarette and stared at the barn lights. Grayson's voice echoed behind him. You switched the jars. Levi stiffened. I know it was you, Grayson said, stepping out of the shadows. You got proof? No, Grayson said. Just your history. You'd believe a teenage cook over a man who's worked here for 4 years? Grayson's voice was low. I'd believe the one who didn't lie. Levi scoffed. She's not a rancher. She doesn't belong here. Grayson stepped closer. She makes this place feel alive again. He paused. You ever do that, Levi? Levi turned. Said nothing. Then flicked his cigarette into the dark and walked away. Scene 9. Rising from ruin the next morning. Clara rose earlier than usual. She scrubbed the stove until it gleamed. Remeasured every ingredient. tasted every batch. And by sunrise, the smell of warm biscuits drifted through the kitchen. Sweet and golden, Grayson entered first, poured himself coffee. Then took a bite, got chewed. Nodded. She smiled. No applause. No fanfare. But the message was clear. She'd come back. Stronger. Smarter. And still standing. 3 weeks had passed since the sabotage incident. Clara had regained the crew's trust, slowly but surely. Her biscuits were the best in 4 counties. Grayson had even asked her to help him reorganize the pantry, something Eleanor used. To do. Then came a letter, delivered by Dustfield's mail rider, wrapped in twine, stained by travel. Clara tore it open with flour-dusted fingers. It was from her mother. The handwriting was shaky. Sweetheart, I miss you something fierce. The cough's gotten worse, and I don't want to lie to you. Doc says I need someone full-time now. If you can come home for just a few weeks, I'd sleep better knowing you're near. Love always, Mama. Clara sat on the edge of the bunkhouse porch, eyes brimming with tears. She thought of the ranch, the men who now looked forward to her food, Grayson's quiet nods of approval, the routine, the dignity she had earned. But home was calling, and her mama needed her. Scene 2. The talk with Grayson that evening. Clara stood in the doorway of Grayson's study. He sat at the old desk, ledger open, boots propped on the WINDOWSILL. She knocked softly. I got a letter, she began. His head turned. Bad news? She nodded. Mama's worse. She needs care. Grayson leaned forward. Clara. Go home. I'll only be gone a few weeks, she said quickly, like she had to earn permission. You don't owe me an explanation. But I don't want to leave you in a mess. What if the men complain again? Grayson stood, walked to the bookshelf, picked up a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside, Eleanor's recipe cards, delicate, handwritten. He handed them to Clara. She would have wanted you to have these. You earned them, Clara blinked. But what if I don't come back? Grayson looked her square in the eye. Then you'll take a part of this place with you, and that's enough. Scene 3. Temporary goodbyes. The next morning, Clara packed her things into a small burlap sack. The entire crew lined up outside the barn, boots dusty, hats in hand. Even Levi kept his distance, watching, but silent. Grayson helped her into the wagon. As it rolled away, Clara looked back. The ranch faded into horizon dust, but something inside her whispered, this isn't the end. Scene 4. Back in Dustfield. Dustfield looked smaller now, quieter. Greyer. Her mother lay on a cot by the fire, breath rattling softly. Clara sank to her knees, took her hand. I'm here now, Mama. And for the next 2 weeks, Clara did everything. She made soup, washed sheets, kept the fire stoked. But some nights, when her mama fell asleep early, Clara would sit at the WINDOWSILL ... and imagine the wind blowing through the stone. Hollow Hills. Scene 5. The telegram. It came on a Thursday. Delivered to the general store. Clara opened it with trembling fingers. Storm tore through the ranch. Stop. Mess hall damage. Stop. We're all safe. Stop. But we need you back. STOP. Signed simply. G.C. Clara folded the telegram slowly. Her mama sat up behind her, voice rasping. You love it there, don't you? Clara turned. I didn't think I would, but yes, I do. Her mother smiled weakly. Then go. Don't make my sickness your cage. I'll come back every week. No, you stay and cook for them. They need you more than you think. Scene 6. The return. 2 days later, Clara arrived at Stone Hollow just as the sun crept over the hills. She stepped off the wagon and gasped. Mess hall roof was half collapsed. The kitchen chimney had crumbled. The pantry was soaked. The crew looked exhausted. But when she appeared, they all straightened. A few even smiled. Grayson walked toward her, hat in hand. You came back. Clara nodded. Let's get to work. Scene 7. Rebuilding with purpose. Clara didn't just cook this time. She led Dot, she helped lay bricks. She organized supplies. She coordinated the ranch hands like a captain on a ship. Grayson watched her quietly. Dot, every now and then, he'd offer help. She rarely needed it. Dot, in 3 weeks. The mess hall was rebuilt, even better than before. Scene 8. The celebration supper. When the new hall opened, Clara cooked a full feast. Smoked ribs, sweet corn, buttermilk biscuits, peach cobbler with cinnamon. Men cheered. Someone brought a fiddle. Laughter echoed across the ranch. Grayson raised a glass. This ranch owes more than repairs to Clara Mayfield. We owe her heart. Clara stood there, cheeks flushed, hands clasped together. Dot, and in that moment, amid sawdust and music, sweat and sweetness, she knew she was no longer the cook's daughter. She was Stone Hollow's heart. Scene 1. After the feast, the celebration at the newly rebuilt mess hall carried into the night. Clara stood at the edge of the dancing circle, her apron speckled with flour, cheeks glowing from praise and wine. Music still drifted through the air, soft. Fiddle, boots tapping wood, men laughing like boys. She didn't join in the dancing. She just watched. Watched the people who once doubted her now sing her praises. Watched the men who once mocked her now tip their hats. Watched Grayson alone near the barn doors, his eyes only on her. Scene 2. Grayson's invite. As the stars shimmered above and the lanterns began to flicker low, Grayson stepped forward. He offered a quiet, "Walk with me?" Clara caught off guard, nodded. Dot. They stepped into the open field behind the bunkhouse, boots crunching over dry grass. The sky was a sea of stars. The air held the soft scent of hay and smoke. Grayson kept his hands in his coat pockets, silent, thoughtful. You've changed things here, he finally said. Clara chuckled. With flour and peaches? With courage, he said, stopping by the fence line. With grit, with care. You remind me of Eleanor. But also, you're not her. You're you. Clara looked at the distant hills. I didn't think I'd ever belong here, she said. I just wanted to keep my mother's job warm for her. I didn't expect this to change me too. Scene 3. A shared pass. Grayson pulled out a silver pocket watch, turning it slowly in his palm. This belonged to my father. He gave it to me when I turned 18. I used to think everything had to tick like a watch, predictable, measured. But life isn't like that. It throws you crooked gears. You learn to listen to different rhythms. Clara glanced at him, curious. You ever loved anyone since Eleanor? She asked quietly. Grayson looked toward the stars. No, I never gave anyone the chance. I shut the door after her, locked it. He looked back at her. But you've been knocking for a while now, quietly, gently. Scene 4. Under the stars, silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. Then Grayson took a breath. I see you, Clara. More than just the girl in the kitchen. More than just your mother's daughter. Clara's heart raced. She fiddled with the edge of her shawl. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Then let me say it for both of us. He took her hand, calloused, meeting soft. Weathered warmth met innocent tremble. I want you to stay here. Not just because you're the best damn cook this ranch ever had, but because I think I've been waiting for you. Scene 5. Clara's doubt. Clara gently pulled her hand away, not out of fear, but uncertainty. You don't owe me anything, she said. Not a job, not your feelings. I never came here for love. Grayson stepped closer. I know. That's why I trust it. Clara looked up at him, eyes glistening. But I need time. This all happened so fast. My mama still needs me some weeks. And I'm only 17, he nodded. Time is yours. No pressure, no rush. He tipped his hat and offered a simple truth. I just wanted you to know. Whether or not you feel the same, you deserve to know. Scene 6. The hug as the wind whispered between the tall grass. Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Grayson's waist. He stiffened in surprise, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a promise. It was an understanding. Two people who had lived lonely in different ways, now standing together under the stars. Scene 7. The return to the bunkhouse. Later that night, Clara lay awake in her bunk, the moon casting silver light across her quilt. Her heart beat a strange rhythm. Part of her still belonged to the girl from Dustfield, but another part now belonged to Stone Hollow Ranch. She clutched Eleanor's recipe box to her chest. Grayson had loved once and lost. She hadn't yet loved at all, but she felt something beginning. She whispered to the night sky, maybe, just maybe. Scene 8. Morning light the next morning. The ranch stirred before the rooster crowed. And Clara was already in the kitchen. She kneaded dough with purpose. She chopped herbs with ease. When Grayson passed by the window, she looked up and smiled. Not shy, not uncertain. Just sure of herself in that moment. The ranch was still dusty, still stubborn, still loud, but it had one thing it never had before. Clara. And now something unspoken tied them both, like heat rising from the hearth, like steam curling from fresh-baked bread, like the beginning of love, not loud, not sudden. But slow, honest, earned. A week passed. The ranch pulsed with new life, the bunkhouse repaired, the meals hearty, and the men content. Clara had found a rhythm. Morning to night, she cooked, cleaned, laughed with the cowhands, and felt a strange sense of wholeness she'd never known in Dustfield. But one morning, a letter arrived. It was from her mother. Clara sat on the back porch steps, unfolded the paper with flour-dusted hands, and read, Sweet Clara, I'm feeling stronger now. The doctor says I'll be up and about by the next full moon. I want you to come home, at least for a while. I miss you. The house feels quiet without your voice. But if your heart has found a new place, don't come back because of guilt. Come, only if it's still your home. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. She folded the letter, hands trembling. Her heart stood at a crossroads between Dustfield and Stone Hollow. Scene 2. The decision weighs heavy. The rest of the day blurred. Clara burned the biscuits. She forgot to salt the stew. Even the ranch hands, once rowdy and teasing, grew silent when they noticed her distant stare. That evening, she stood at the cliffside edge of the ranch, where the sunset spilled like melted copper across the hills. Grayson found her there, leaning on a post. You look like someone carrying a saddle too heavy for her size, he said quietly. Clara held out the letter. He read it. When he finished, he nodded slowly. You should go. Family comes first. I don't know if I'm leaving or going home, she whispered. Scene 3. The wagon at dawn. By dawn the next day, Clara had packed a modest sack, just essentials. The ranch hands lined up outside the bunkhouse, like boys at church. They each offered shy goodbyes. Eddie, the youngest ranch hand, gave her a pocket knife. It's lucky, he muttered. Saved me from a coyote once. Old Hank handed her a bundle of dried herbs. For your ma's soup. Grayson stood back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The same man who had once refused to give her a chance now looked like he was struggling to let her go. You're always welcome back, he finally said. Clara smiled. I know. Scene 4. Back in Dustfield. Hadn't changed. The wind still kicked up dirt. The town still whispered rumors. And their house still leaned a little to the left, but her mother was up thinner, but smiling. Clara ran into her arms like a child again. She cooked, cleaned, helped the neighbors, sat on the porch swing with her mama during sunset, and yet something gnawed at her soul. The town now felt smaller. Her old dreams felt dimmer. Her hands missed the weight of ranch pans, and her heart missed the quiet strength of one particular cowboy. Scene 5. The question 2 weeks passed, then 3. One night, as they shelled peas under the lantern light, Clara's mother looked at her. "You've been staring off a lot." Clara didn't deny it. "You said I should only stay if this was still my home," she whispered. "But I think I left part of my heart on that ranch." Her mother smiled sadly. "Then, go find the rest of it." Scene 6. To return, Clara didn't wait another day. She packed again, less hesitant this time. On her way to Stone Hollow, the wagon hit every bump and bend, but her heart only beat faster. When the ranch finally crested into view, it was late. Afternoon. She saw the familiar fence posts, the rising smoke from the cookhouse, the bunkhouse doors wide open. And Grayson, on the porch, nursing coffee, stared as if he'd seen a ghost. Clara stepped down, gusted off her skirt. "I thought I was just filling in for my mama," she said. "But it turns out I was finding my place." Scene 7. A different kind of welcome. The men hollered when they saw her. "Look, who's back? 'Bout time. Hope you brought pie." Grayson didn't speak. He walked down the steps slowly, boots crunching against dry earth. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I want to be here. With you, with the mess, with the mornings and the meals. All of it." He smiled. "You're home, Clara." And this time, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not bold, not rushed, but real. Scene 8. Epilogue. Clara of Stone Hollow. Months passed. The ranch thrived. Clara wore an apron by day and walked hand in hand with Grayson by night. She expanded the kitchen, taught Eddie to make bread, started a recipe journal titled Stone Hollow Suppers. Sometimes she still visited her mother in Dustfield, but always came back, because Stone Hollow wasn't just the place she cooked at, it was the place she grew, place she fell in love, the place she chose. And as the sun dipped behind the hills each evening, Grayson would watch Clara at the window, the golden light dancing on her face, and thank the stars for the girl who once asked for just one chance. End.